You're coming through and choosing us as your number one radio station. My name is Kevin once again. We are here until 8 o'clock and we continue to talk about the COVID-19, the coronavirus, which is the sickness that has now brought the world upside down. You can actually see by how it has disrupted the economy, social cohesion, and all facets of human existence. I do have with me in the studio a political analyst, independent commentator, and columnist, Vitalio Angola, to help us look into what are the socio-political dynamics that have been brought about by this COVID-19. Vitalio, good morning to you and welcome to the show.
Good afternoon to you too, Kevin.
That's right.
After 12.
That's right, Vitalio.
Yes.
And yes, what are the socio-political dynamics that you have looked at and have seen as to be surfacing around right now as a result of this pandemic that is so deep-seated?
There are actually many at play, many that we are witnessing. Going back to when the first COVID-19 tested positive, I think it was somewhere last week.
Right.
The Belgian couple, and already our government responded by calling off the 21st of March independence celebration, meaning that there was a seriousness with which we approached what we picked up in international media and what the experts told us. To fight this pandemic, we need to practice social distancing. We need to cover our mouths. We need to sanitize our hands. And already we saw citizens reacting to what the state had said. We saw people wearing masks, really people taking the cause of government very seriously, people washing their hands, people stocking up on sanitizers and the like. And then immediately we could witness the socio-political dynamic, because only people with access to the money to buy these sanitizers, to stock up on toilet paper, to stock up on food, could actually go out and do that. And then after that, we had the announcement of the closing down of the Erongo in the commerce regions.
The lockdown.
Yeah, the lockdown. Then immediately you saw that there was a rush of people leaving to the north, people leaving the commerce in the Erongo regions. What does that tell you? It tells you the social aspect of people commuting from the rural areas into the urban areas in search of jobs and a better life. But when they saw that the
regions have been locked down, and we do have a virus out there that's threatening their living.
Their livelihood, they immediately went back to the north. So it says that the potential for rural areas to actually, for people to subsist on the land, is actually there. So the question of why are we not developing rural areas so that people stay there instead of people flocking into the urban areas and causing congestion? These are the social political dynamics of the state of Namibia, which we have to look at, and which became apparent because of the COVID-19. People actually have options of where they can stay, but they rush because of economic factors to urban areas. But when they have no choice of survival in the urban areas, they move back to the rural. So rural-urban migration became very evident as a result of this COVID.
This then should be urban-rural migration.
Yes.
The opposite. So why exactly, from your observation, is it to say that as far as this segment of our population is concerned, that went back to the rural areas during the lockdown, the urban lifestyle, the urban setup could not take care of them during a time where they lack, during a time where they do not have the fundamental freedoms, they do not have immediate access to everything that they need in their day-to-day living. Can you say then that they saw themselves in a situation where they were like, the city cannot support us during this time?
Yes, definitely. That is exactly what played out for everybody to see. So it talks to the creation of social safety nets. Our government hasn't invested so much in social safety nets in terms of access to food, in terms of access to shelter. But if our government were to actually invest in those social safety nets, would it would is it the most appropriate measure? Because and will we not invite dependency on the government if we create social safety nets within the urban areas? Because now what has become very apparent is the need for rural development to take place. We have young people, they do have the capacity. So has government actually created the foundation for people to remain in rural areas, to be able to develop their rural areas, to innovate so that those rural areas can be self-sufficient, and then we don't have the problem of migration whereby people migrate to urban, don't have really good jobs, don't have social safety nets, become dependent on government. So going post coronavirus Namibia, these are the things we will have to look at in terms of the the potential for rural areas for development. It's something that really needs to be looked at. And those people who come from those areas, why are they not staying in those areas and developing those areas? It takes time, but the migration into urban areas is also not a healthy situation to be in.
Right. Would you really blame government's failure to develop the rural areas, or what is at play right now are the forces of capitalism, that capital chooses where it wants to be, and by the nature of the rural areas themselves, capital wouldn't want to go there. Capital would rather dock within Windhoek and
Yeah.
other towns that we have.
Yes, human resource is also a form of capital, but in order for people to stay in those places where they are, there must be certain key factors which only government can provide. It's only government that can provide water. A private investor could never invest in water infrastructure because there will be no profit.
In rural areas.
Yes, capitalism is different by profit. But if you have water, if you have internet, if you have banks, if you have roads, you are creating the social infrastructure which is needed for people to improve their lives. And that onus falls on the government to provide. It doesn't fall on private individuals. So yes, the government has a very important hand to play, and that's why we have the Ministry of Rural and Urban Development. It is to fast track that development, to create the meaningful infrastructure to allow people to be able to stay in those places, innovate in those places, and build up those places so that they remain there. And then we decongest urban area and we spread out development.
That's right. If you look at political dynamics and the political space in South Africa, we have seen the racialization of capital. That capital does have color.
Yes.
White monopoly capital. But also, there's been what has been called black capital. If white capital cannot develop the rural areas, what is black capital doing? What is the black middle class doing? Why is the black middle class not going to invest in rural areas? And at the end of the day, does capital really have color?
Oof. It's very difficult because I'm one person who is very apprehensive about giving these things a racial dynamic, because this is a question of haves and have-nots. I don't like to give it the label of black and white. Yes, there are indigenous Namibians who come from the rural areas and who have settled in the urban areas, and these are because of push factors. And even our history teaches us that people had to pay taxes, people needed access to goods like soap, basic necessities. And the only way you could get that is that if you got a job in one of the mines, maybe the mines in Tsumeb, the mines in Oranjemund, you get that little money, you send home, you pay taxes to the king, you pay tribute. And as a result, these things have a historical essence. So the country just developed on that trajectory where people were dependent on going out into the urban centers, earning a living and repatriating that money back to the rural areas. So it took place over a long period of time, and it's something that we have to disinvest from. But to give it a face of white capital or black capital, I think it's wrong, because with the COVID virus, we see that it does not really have a racial face. It affects all of us across our color lines, and we are all in this together. So if we start to polarize each other, where we say, okay, there's white capital here and then there's black capital, we are not dealing with the issues at hand. We always talk about the notion of one Namibia, one nation, and I think COVID should actually bring us together, where we don't not differentiate ourselves on the basis of the color of our skin, but we identify ourselves as Namibians, and we work for the betterment of the Namibian society as a whole.
But have you seen this COVID-19 affecting Namibians at the same level? If you have to look at the lockdowns, for instance, they've really become more of a luxury for the middle class. You see them, paying their Wi-Fi, reading e-books, watching Netflix. It's not the same situation with the men and women that's in the informal settlement. Can you say the COVID-19 has also brought to the surface the inequities that are there in our society, and really revealing that right in our face to say, this is how divided you are? Whereas the lockdown is a luxury for the person who's next door, it is not the same for the other person who relies on being outside the shack in order to make money.
It definitely brings it out, because now it plays out in front of my eyes, in front of our eyes, but it has always been there. And we have always, there are a lot of groups in Namibia, affirmative repositioning being one of them, Shark Dollars Association being one of them, political parties such as the LPM, Landless People's Movement, who have been driving the agenda of equitable distribution of resources. However, because of the COVID-19 and the fear that has struck everybody, you see that these political players, they are also quiet, because there's that fear of, oh, COVID-19, I cannot go out. But maybe it's also a time for people to be more radical, to raise their voices more, and to demand better from government. We have informal settlements. There should not be informal settlements in Namibia. The informal settlements are congested. We've heard the mayor of Windhoek once upon a time, 3 years ago, Agnes Kafula, saying that no, land is only for special people. We had a mayor or a CEO in Katima saying land is only for the rich. Land should be for everybody, and everybody should have access to land, and people should be able to build modern infrastructure, because the fear is, what happens if COVID-19 enters the informal settlements, which are congested, where people don't have the luxury of practicing social distances? Then we are in for a tragedy. In South Africa, the first case last week of COVID-19, one person from Alexandria, which is one of the most densely populated townships, actually testing positive for COVID-19. People are afraid, what if we have outbreaks? And yesterday I was watching a CNN, and there was a refugee camp, I think somewhere in Greece. They haven't recorded any instances of COVID-19, but the fear is there. What if we have a case? That case is going to spread. So what has government done to prepare themselves for this eventuality? With the Black Death in Europe, is it the, okay, I don't, Black Death was in the 14th century.
The Spanish flu.
The Spanish flu was in 1918 or 1919. The Black Death was in the 14th century. It was, I think, 1482. What that taught people in Europe is that we need to have sewage systems. We need to be prepared, because it's not the last epidemic. Epidemics, they happen, they are recurring. They are recurring events. So how do we prepare ourselves? So people invested in infrastructure, sewage infrastructure. These are the things that would limit a spread of disease if a pandemic of COVID's magnitude takes place. And that is.
Do you think that the COVID-19, post-COVID-19, Namibia will be in a better place to implement with agency what the country has not been able to implement? Decent accommodation, provision of water to informal settlements, something like that.
It's
maybe recreating our healthcare system so that it becomes very inclusive and world class.
Yes, it's difficult to predict at the current moment because now we're watching the news now. We are only at 13. So maybe if we remain there and we don't see an outbreak, the government might say that, oh, this was just a boo-ha-ha. People were trying to scare us and we were ready, we were prepared. It can go because now it's about shaping public opinion. So public opinion can be shaped whereby people believe that yes, we were actually in fact prepared, and these diseases we have been prepared and they were not going to affect us. That's why they haven't affected us. But like how the pandemic spread in other countries, we saw that it was introduced and then it spiked over time. So people are saying that we might be 3 weeks behind South Africa. So if the outbreak really does bring a toll on our health system, definitely there would be a citizens response. Those people who survive the outbreak, they are going to make greater demands and they are going to involve themselves in politics, because I think up until now we haven't had such a scare in Namibia. But now people are going to want to participate in the decision making, and people will not be quiet. It will not be business as usual. So definitely it's going to turn around the socio-political dynamics of the state, but it's hard to predict in what manner it will actually change.
Right, and where are Namibia's millionaires and billionaires if they're there? We saw Patrice Motsepe, we saw some of the prominent business guys in South Africa coming out pledging billions of dollars, billion point five. Where are our people, our rich?
We don't really know where they are, because at the end of the day, the government has set up a emergency fund. They have not reported to us how much was being deposited. There are people who actually deposit to these type of causes. They do give money, but they do avail their resources, but they do not want to be named because sometimes there's that fear that they might become targets of bototos or whatever. And other people are also just humble in their approach. They would rather give money and not boast about it. What we saw in South Africa is that yes, the Patrick Motsepes have given 1 billion, the Ruperts have given 1.5 billion, but what we heard later on, that the Ruperts, they actually gave, what they are giving is loans which will have to be repaid. So it's not really a humanitarian effort, but it's people exploiting the COVID-19
Situation.
to gain market access, to give out loans to SMEs in the form of a bailout. But at the end of the day, people are going to repay those loans
And those guys
with
were
interest.
those guys were described as the patriotic bourgeois. Is there anything like a patriotic bourgeois?
I don't I don't know. I cannot really say. They might be patriotic because they have the means to to give to these sorts of causes. Some of them might be doing it to build on their brands. Some people might be doing it not because humanity needs it, but because they want to feel good about themselves. So everybody has their different motives for their actions. And at the moment, I cannot really judge, but I think that the humanitarian response, in the end, if it is to relieve or to help government in its fight against COVID-19, then it should be welcomed regardless of the intentions of the person giving. Because the end result is that we need the resources to mitigate what we are going through. And if these people are providing the resources, yes, let us be thankful and let us be grateful, and not cast aspersions on them and say, yeah, they are only doing it, but they've been exploiting people the whole time. Their workers are not paid decent salaries, so obviously they are going to make so much money, and they've also benefited from apartheid. That's why they have so much money. If we start to politicize issues in this time where humanity really needs the resources, I think we are actually diverting from the situation at hand. And the situation at hand is COVID-19.
And just as we round up our conversation, Fidelity, can you say that the COVID-19 situation has projected Hage Geingob as a resolute, strong and bold leader who has taken some very bold and drastic action without having to waver?
Not necessarily. I mean, what other choice is open to him? this thing is confronting the whole world. It is, yes, he has shown astute leadership, but that is what is required from a president who is leading a nation state. However, in February, he took a surprise visit to Katutura, and to many of our disappointment, he said that yes, the infrastructure is good, yes, the healthcare system is good, and everybody who has been in the system has been failed by the system. A lot of people who are patients of Katutura Hospital will not give it a standing review similar to what he has done. And if he says that these state hospitals are up to par, why does he seek medical treatment at private hospitals and not at these state hospitals? So obviously one can look at it as a political statement to reassure people that yes, he is on the job, but that is what he's elected for, and I don't think really it's necessary to congratulate somebody for doing his job. But at the end of the time, yes, our leaders also, they are human beings, they require our moral support. So as far as COVID is concerned, yes, he has actually shown resolute leadership with the team that he has surrounded himself with. We have seen him bringing in Dr. Bernard Haufiku, who was rumored to be fired 2 years ago for taking a stance against corruption in the health system. He brought him back because of the man's capability. So we could see that yes, the president is actually choosing the team around him who can help him to achieve the goal.
All right, and lastly,
or to mitigate tragedy.
Comparing and contrasting Kalumbi Shangula and Zweli Mkhize, both are health ministers, both are dealing with the same situation.
Yeah.
Do you think that Kalumbi Shangula is really stepping up his game? Is he as robust when it comes to communication, when it comes to meeting Namibians, being on time, holding those press conferences? Can you say that is...
Okay, in terms of Shangula, I've heard a lot of people having discussions, but it boils down to personality and also who has appointed him. You see, he is appointed by the president and he's a minister of health. So in terms of the Ministry of Health, he has to, all the statements, all the press statements he's making, he has to consult with the professionals within the ministry. So he doesn't only speak on his behalf. With Mkhize, I have not really been following that much of the South African news, so I cannot comment. But the personality of Shangula, I think, for a better comparison, we would want to compare him with Haufiku. Haufiku was brought in by the president to lead a task force, so he's more at liberty to speak his mind and to advise and to share his opinion. But with Kalumbi Shangula, he's not at liberty to share his opinion because he's getting different information from the different people he has to consult with, which are the medical doctors, the medical superintendents. He has to consult with his colleagues in the cabinet. So he's not as free to be the person maybe we would have liked him to be. So at the end of the day, to compare and contrast, it can be unfair. But as political commentators, we do like to compare and contrast. And what I'm hearing on the ground is that people have more trust or more confidence in the leadership ability of Haufiku, who is the predecessor of Shangula. And every time Shangula holds a press conference, he is confronted with mistrust. The media mistrust him, the public mistrust him, and that's because of the government he represents, which has lost credibility in the eyes of the people. And him himself is more of a laid back and a conservative person. So he doesn't really want to be in the limelight, and people are like, we want answers, because the whole nation is paranoid. And maybe the answers they want from him, he cannot really provide, because he's accountable also to the people he works with in the cabinet, his appointing authority, and the superintendents in hospitals. So he has to actually navigate this very delicately.
That's right. That is Vitali Wangula, columnist and political commentator here, taking us through the socio-political dynamics of the COVID-19, the politics, and how also the COVID-19 is affecting society. We do appreciate Vitali for giving us this opportunity to tap into your well of knowledge and wisdom.
Thank you very much. I always enjoy being here. The media have played a very important role Some of the actors at Eagle FM, like Shelligan, she's always updating us on WhatsApp with the latest statistics, the latest news, when the press conferences. So you guys are actually doing a extremely important job of keeping the nation informed. And if it was not for you guys, some of us at home wouldn't have known. So the only other thing I would like to commend media on is that they're actually verifying, and we don't have those instances of fake news or misinformation. With the social media, there's a lot of misinformation uh, going around, but with the media and also with this media house, Eagle FM, I think the information which you are giving us is credible, and you are really building trust with your listeners. And I would just like to encourage you to stay on that trajectory. We are all of us are in this together, and you guys are really playing an important role. And thank you for inviting me.
That's right. We do appreciate it.